Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. Maria sat at her kitchen table, the faint glow of the early evening sun casting long shadows across the small, cluttered room. It was just another quiet night, or at least that's what she thought. She was lost in thought, swirling a spoon around in her cup of tea when the knock at the door interrupted her solitude. She wasn't expecting anyone. It was too late for a delivery, and her friends had long since gone home. Reluctantly, she got up from the chair and walked to the door, wondering who could possibly be out there. It was a strange hour, a time when most people had already settled into their homes. When she opened the door, she was met by a man standing on her doorstep. His clothes were old and torn, and his hair hung in dirty strands around his face. His eyes were tired, bloodshot, and glazed over with a hint of something dark, desperation. The smell of alcohol and sweat lingered in the air as he shifted nervously on his feet, glancing down at the worn shoes that barely seemed to hold together. "Can I help you?" Maria asked, her voice soft but cautious. It was a question she rarely asked of strangers, especially at this time of night. The man looked up at her with pleading eyes. I just need a place to stay for the night. Just one night, please." Maria's heart ached for him, but her instincts screamed for her to say no. She had always been cautious. Her mother had raised her to be wary of people who didn't have their lives together. After all, it was dangerous to invite a stranger into your home, especially one who appeared to have no place else to go. But something about the man stopped her. Perhaps it was the vulnerability in his eyes. Maybe it was the sadness that seemed to hang around him like a cloud. Or perhaps, deep down, she understood what it felt like to be desperate, to have nowhere to turn, to feel like the world had abandoned you. Without thinking, she stepped aside and motioned for him to enter. "Just for tonight," she said softly, as if making a deal with herself. "But you need to understand, I don't want any trouble." The man nodded gratefully. "I swear, I won't be any trouble. Thank you." As Maria closed the door behind him, she felt a strange mix of unease and sympathy. She led the man into the living room, which was modest but clean. A small couch, a few chairs, and a small table covered in books and papers from her job as a freelance writer. The smell of home-cooked meals still lingered in the air, though it had been hours since she'd finished her dinner. She offered him a seat on the couch and started gathering blankets from the closet to make him a bed. He seemed exhausted, barely able to keep his eyes open. She wondered just how long it had been since he had slept in a real bed, with clean sheets and pillows to rest his head. As she worked, she tried to make small talk, hoping the conversation would break the awkwardness of the situation. "What's your name?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. The man hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether to answer. "Tom," he said finally. "Tom Harris." Maria nodded and continued arranging the blankets. "Where are you from, Tom?" she asked, trying to learn more about the man she had just allowed into her home. Tom's response was soft, almost a whisper. "I used to live in a few places, but I lost everything. Job, house, family. I've been on the streets for a while now." Maria stopped, in her tracks, glancing at him. There was something in his voice that suggested he wasn't just telling her about a rough patch in his life. There was a deeper pain there, something that went beyond the surface. She didn't ask any more questions, sensing that he wasn't ready to share more. She finished setting up his temporary bed on the couch, and he sank into it, still looking worn out. For a moment he closed his eyes, as though he had been carrying the weight of the world for far too long. Maria stood there, unsure of what to do next. She wanted to help him, but she also wanted to make sure she wasn't getting too involved. She had her own problems to deal with, her own life to manage. "Do you need anything else?" she asked, not sure whether she should offer him food or leave him to rest in peace. Tom shook his head. "No, just Just some rest. Thank you again. Maria nodded and stood up. Well, I'll be in the other room if you need anything. As she walked to her bedroom, her thoughts raced. Something about Tom's story didn't add up. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something important. It wasn't just that he looked down on his luck. It was the way he spoke, as if he'd once been someone important. But who was he? How did a man who seemed so lost end up on her doorstep? She turned off the light and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day were playing in her mind, but something felt off. She couldn't place it, but she knew that this man would have an impact on her life, whether she liked it or not. The hours passed slowly, and just as Maria was about to drift off to sleep, she heard a sound from the living room, a soft shuffle. Her heart skipped a beat and she sat up in bed, listening intently. Was Tom awake? Was he moving around? She quietly got out of bed and crept to the door, carefully peeking through the crack. To her surprise, she saw him sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. His face was etched with sadness, his eyes hollow. There was something haunting about the way he looked, something that made Maria feel as though she was intruding on a moment of deep reflection. She wanted to ask him more about his past, but something told her to hold back. She didn't want to push him too far. Instead, she quietly closed the door and returned to her bed, though she couldn't shake the feeling that the man she had let into her life was about to change everything. The next day, when Maria woke up, it was already late. Morning? She rubbed her eyes and stretched, still feeling the weight of last night's encounter lingering in her mind. She had expected to find Tom still asleep on the couch, but when she entered the living room, it was empty. The blankets were neatly folded, and the couch was untouched. A sense of panic hit her, and she quickly glanced around the apartment, half expecting Tom to have vanished during the night. But then she saw him, standing by the window, looking out over the city. His back was to her, and for a moment Maria just watched him. There was something different about him now. The way he carried himself, the way he stood. He didn't seem like the same man who had been curled up on her couch just hours earlier. "Tom?" she asked cautiously, stepping into the room. He turned to face her, and for the first time, Maria noticed the change in his appearance. His posture was straighter, more confident. His eyes, which had been so empty last night, were now sharp, almost calculating. He looked different, like he wasn't the homeless man she had helped the night before. "I'm sorry," he said, quietly, as though reading her mind. "I didn't mean to startle you." Maria blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" Tom gave her a faint, almost cryptic smile. "I'm not the man you think I am, Maria. I'm not the man you helped last night." The words hung in the air, and Maria felt her heart skip a beat. What was he talking about? Who was he really? "I don't understand," she whispered, stepping closer to him. Tom took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. "I was once a millionaire. I used to run a successful business, a company that was worth billions. But I lost it all, and now I've been hiding, trying to rebuild my life. I didn't expect you to help me, but I'm grateful that you did." Maria's head spun. The man standing before her wasn't just a homeless person. He was a billionaire, CEO, someone who had been at the top of the world, and somehow, through some twist of fate, had ended up on her doorstep. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Tom's gaze softened. "Because I didn't want anyone to know. Not yet. I needed to see if I could trust you." Maria stared at him, the reality of the situation sinking in. This was no ordinary man. He was someone with a past that had been hidden for so long. As the seconds passed, Maria felt a surge of emotions: shock, confusion, disbelief. She had just invited a millionaire CEO into her home, and she had no idea what was coming next. The suspense was only beginning to unfold, and Maria was about to embark on a journey that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Maria stood frozen in the middle of the room, her mind racing to process what Tom had just told her. A millionaire CEO? The same man who'd been sleeping on her couch just hours ago? She could barely wrap her mind around the words. The implications were massive, and yet everything about Tom screamed the opposite. The torn clothes, the disheveled hair, the exhaustion. In his eyes, it all seemed so far removed from the world of billion-dollar companies and executive boardrooms. "Are you serious?" Maria finally asked, her voice trembling. "You're telling me you were a billionaire?" Tom sighed deeply, his gaze drifting to the window. "Yes," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I was. I built my company from the ground up. It was one of the most successful tech firms in the world. But things went wrong, very wrong." Maria felt her heart racing. She wasn't sure what kind of answer she expected, but she hadn't anticipated this. The man in front of her didn't look anything like the kind of person who would have once run a multi-billion-dollar corporation. She struggled to connect the man she had helped last night with the story he was telling now. She took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. "Why did you end up on the streets then?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Tom's eyes darkened, and for a moment Maria thought he might avoid the question, but then he turned to face her, his expression pained. "It wasn't a choice. I didn't end up on the streets because I wanted to. It happened because of a betrayal that shattered everything I had worked for." Maria's curiosity intensified. She had helped many people in her life, but she had never encountered someone with a story like Tom's. "Betrayal," she repeated. "By who?" Tom's jaw clenched, and for a moment Maria could see the anger and hurt bubbling just beneath the surface. He seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether to go on, but then he exhaled sharply, his shoulders sagging. "My own business partners. They took advantage of me. They sold me out, drained the company dry, and left me with nothing. I fought back, tried to regain control, but it was too late. The damage had been done, and by the time I realized what had happened, I had lost everything: my reputation, my wealth, my company, and my family." Maria could see the pain etched on his face, and her heart went out to him. She hadn't expected such a story. She had assumed Tom was just another homeless man with no future, but now she realized there was so much more to him. She could see that his downfall had been more than just a matter of bad luck. It had been the result of something deeply personal and destructive. "I'm sorry," Maria said quietly, stepping closer to him. "That sounds awful, but if you were so successful, why didn't you try to rebuild sooner?" Tom's eyes softened and he looked away. "I did try, but when you lose everything, it's not just about money. It's about your sense of self-worth. I became a different person, Maria. I wasn't the man I once was. The humiliation, the betrayal, it broke me." Maria was silent for a long moment, letting his words sink in. She had known pain in her life, her own struggles with loneliness and loss, but nothing compared to what Tom was describing. To have everything ripped away, to be betrayed by the very people you trusted the most. Maria couldn't even begin to imagine the toll that must have taken on him. "So, what now?" she asked finally. "What happens now that I know who you really are?" Tom ran a hand through his hair, looking weary. "I'm not sure. I've been hiding for so long. I've tried to keep a low profile, keep my past in the shadows. But after everything that's happened, I feel like I need to do something. I need to get back on my feet. But this time, I want to do it differently." Maria studied him, unsure of what to say. She had never been in a situation like this before. On the one hand, she felt compassion for him, but on the other, she was overwhelmed by the gravity of what he was revealing. It wasn't just about his fall from grace, it was about his personal journey. And the more he spoke, the more Maria realized that there was much more to his story than he was letting on. "I don't know how I can help you," Maria said slowly, "but if you want, I can help you get back on your feet. Maybe I can help you find a job or something. I don't know, Tom, but if you really want to start over, I'll do what I can." Tom looked at her with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "You'd do that for me?" Maria nodded, her expression firm. "Yes, I would. No one should have to go through what you've been through. And you've already shown me that there's more to you than just the man who's been living on the streets." For a moment there was a quiet stillness between them. Then Tom spoke, his voice tinged with something like hope. Maybe I can start by telling you everything. Everything that happened. You've already shown me kindness, Maria. Maybe it's time I showed you who I really am." Maria took a deep breath, the weight of the moment sinking in. She had no idea what she was getting herself into, but something told her that this was just the beginning. This story was far from over, and she was about to become part of a mystery that could change everything. Flashback. Tom's rise and fall. Tom leaned back in his chair, the sounds of the office fading into the background as he scanned the latest numbers. His company, Harris Technologies, was doing better than ever. They were on the cutting edge of tech, their products used by millions across the globe. He had worked tirelessly to get to this point, building the company from a small startup in his garage to one of the most recognized names in the industry. Tom had always believed in the power of innovation and hard work. He had started his business with little more than an idea and a dream. But with time, he had assembled a team of brilliant minds who shared his vision. Together, they had created something extraordinary. They had made breakthroughs that changed the way people lived and worked. Harris Technologies had become a household name, but there were always risks. And in the world of business, trust was everything. One day, Tom had come in to find an email from one of his closest partners, William. The email was brief, but it was enough to send a shiver down Tom's spine. It was about a deal that had been made behind Tom's back, a deal that would transfer millions in company funds to offshore accounts, all orchestrated by the very people Tom had trusted the most. Tom had been blindsided. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, angry confrontations, and legal battles. William and the other partners had betrayed him, using their influence to seize control of the company. They had pushed Tom out, and before he could even begin to fight back, they had stripped the company of its assets and left him with nothing. It had all happened so fast. The fall from grace was brutal. One minute Tom had everything, his company, his wealth, his reputation, and the next, it was all gone. The world he had worked so hard to build crumbled before his eyes. Back in the present, Maria sat across from Tom, watching as the memories of his past played out in his eyes. He looked like a man haunted by his own decisions, yet she could see the flicker of determination beneath his pain. "You don't have to tell me everything if you don't want to," Maria said gently, not wanting to push him too hard. "But if you're ready, I'm listening," Tom nodded, wiping a hand over his face as if to shake off the weight of his past. "I need to make it right. I can't go on like this forever. I have to find a way to rebuild, to prove to myself that I can do it again." Maria gave him a soft smile. "You've already started, by opening up to me, by telling me your story. That's the first step. Now you just need to take the next one." Tom looked at her, his eyes filled with both gratitude and something deeper, hope. It was the first time in a long time that he had allowed himself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could start again. And maybe, just maybe this time, it would be different. The conversation didn't end there. As the day turned into evening, Tom and Maria continued talking. She learned more about his past, about his vision for the future, and about the man he had once been. Tom wasn't just a victim of betrayal, he was a man with a plan. And though it had been a long time since he had made any real decisions, he was starting to see a path forward. Maria had no idea what was coming next, but she knew that the man who had come into her life that day was someone she wouldn't forget, and she had no idea how much her life was about to change. Maria sat across from Tom, her mind still spinning from everything he had shared. His words echoed in her ears, each one heavy with the weight of his past. The man in front of her was not the man she had first met, the homeless soul, lost and broken. He was someone far more complex, a man whose life had been turned upside down by betrayal and loss. Yet beneath the pain and the struggles, there was a glimmer of something else. Hope. It had been a week since Tom had shared his story with her, and since then, things had slowly started to shift. Tom had moved into a spare room in her apartment. At first it felt strange, almost surreal, but Maria knew that this was the right thing to do. She could see that he was trying to put his life back together, and she was determined to help him, even if she wasn't sure exactly how. They spent their days together, Tom trying to get his bearings, and Maria working on her freelance projects. Tom had started looking into tech companies and potential job openings, but it wasn't easy. He hadn't worked in years. His mind, once sharp and filled with ideas, now seemed clouded by doubt and fear. But Maria could see the flickers of the man he used to be, the CEO, the visionary. One afternoon, as they sat in the living room, Tom turned to Maria, his face a mixture of frustration and determination. "I need to do more than just look for a job. I need to prove that I can still do it. I can't go back to just being another guy working for someone else." Maria raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" Tom's eyes darkened. "I mean, I need to start my own company again. I need to rebuild what I lost." Maria was taken aback. "Start over? From scratch?" He nodded. "Yes, I've been thinking about it for a while now. I've got the skills, the knowledge, and the drive. All I need is the right opportunity, and maybe a little help." Maria was silent for a long moment, considering his words. It was a bold decision, one that carried a lot of risk. Tom had already lost everything once. Starting over would mean diving back into the very world that had betrayed him. But she could also see the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had propelled him to success in the first place. "I don't know," Maria said, her voice hesitant. "Starting over is risky, Tom. You've been through a lot, and the business world, it's not the same as it was before." "I know it's risky," Tom replied, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "But what's the alternative? Stay here in this apartment doing nothing. I'm not the kind of person who just sits back and lets life pass by. I want to rebuild. I have to rebuild." Maria could see the resolve in his eyes, and despite her reservations, she found herself agreeing. "Okay," she said finally. "What do you need?" Tom's expression softened. "I need a plan. I need to figure out what kind of business I want to start. It can't be the same as before. I've learned my lesson. I need to do something that has a purpose, something that can make a difference." Maria nodded, impressed by his self-awareness. "Well, let's figure it out together. Maybe we can brainstorm some ideas." And so they began. For days, they pored over ideas, discussing the tech industry, business trends, and Tom's own strengths. Tom had always been passionate about innovation, about creating things that could change the world. It wasn't just about making money, it was about making an impact. But as they talked, Maria could sense Tom's growing uncertainty. He had once been at the top of the world, but now he seemed lost, unsure of how to proceed. "Maybe you should take a break," Maria suggested one evening, noticing his exhaustion. "You've been pushing yourself too hard." Tom rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of his thoughts. "I can't afford a break. I have to keep going. I have to prove to myself that I can still do this." Maria watched him, feeling a mixture of empathy and concern. She knew how hard it was to rebuild after a fall, how it could consume you, make you forget everything else. She could see that Tom was driven by something deeper than ambition. He was driven by the need to reclaim his identity, to prove that he wasn't defined by his past mistakes. As the days went on, Tom began to formulate a plan. It wasn't much yet, just a few rough ideas about starting a new tech company, focusing on sustainability and social impact. He had connections in the industry, people who had once worked with him, but he wasn't sure if they would be willing to take a chance on him again. The idea of asking for help was daunting, but Tom knew he couldn't do it alone. One afternoon, as they were sitting together, Tom suddenly turned to Maria with a question that caught her off guard. "Do you think I can do this? Do you think I can rebuild everything?" Maria hesitated. She had seen the pain in his eyes, the self-doubt that plagued him, but she had also seen his strength, his resilience. She knew that Tom had the potential to rise again, but it wasn't just about his skills. It was about his ability to trust again, to open himself up to others. "I think you can," she said finally, "but it's going to take time, and you're going to have to trust people, let them in." Tom looked at her, his gaze searching. "Trust," he muttered. "That's the hardest part." Maria smiled softly. "I know, but you can't rebuild by yourself, Tom. You have to surround yourself with people who believe in you, who want to see you succeed." Tom nodded slowly, as if processing her words. "I guess I've been trying to do it all on my own for too long." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Tom reached out to a few of his old contacts in the industry, people who had worked with him during the peak of his success. Some were hesitant to respond, still unsure about getting involved with him. Others were more receptive, though they were cautious, unwilling to take the risk of partnering with someone who had fallen so far. But despite the challenges, Tom felt a sense of momentum building. Slowly but surely, he was starting to build a network of people who believed in him. They didn't trust him completely yet, but they were willing to listen. And that was a start. One evening, after a long day of meetings and phone calls, Tom collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but hopeful. "I think it's starting to come together," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. Maria looked at him, a smile tugging at her lips. "I'm glad to hear that. You've worked hard for this." Tom looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Maria. You've been here for me when no one else was. You gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it." Maria shook her head. "You don't have to thank me. You're the one who's doing all the hard work. I'm just here to support you." Tom smiled, but there was something else in his eyes, something deeper. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something more complex, something that made Maria feel uneasy, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. "I want you to know that I'm not just rebuilding my company," Tom said quietly. "I'm rebuilding my life. And I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but I'm hoping you'll be a part of it." Maria was silent for a long moment, unsure of what to say. She had never expected any of this, never expected to become so deeply involved in Tom's journey. But now, as she looked at him, she realized that she had become more than just his helper. She had become a key part of his new life, his new beginning. "I'll be here," Maria said softly, "for as long as you need me." Tom nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. "Thank you. I can't do this without people who believe in me." The next step, the weeks that followed, were filled with progress and setbacks, triumphs and frustrations. Tom's network continued to grow, and he managed to secure a few key partnerships with former colleagues. But there were still challenges ahead. Tom knew that starting a business from scratch wasn't easy, and the road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles. But with Maria by his side, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. As the company began to take shape, Tom started to envision the future, a future where he could not only rebuild his wealth, but also make a positive impact. on the world. He wasn't interested in just creating another tech company. He wanted to create something that mattered, something that could change the way people lived and worked. Maria continued to support him, offering ideas, advice, and encouragement. She had become an integral part of his journey, and as the months passed, their bond deepened. What had started as an act of kindness, inviting a homeless man into her home, had turned into something much more significant. Maria had become a part of Tom's new life, and together they were building something that neither of them could have imagined. The air in the small, cluttered apartment felt heavy with anticipation. Tom sat at the kitchen table, his hands resting on the edges, fingers tapping nervously. It had been nearly 3 months since he had begun his journey to rebuild his life, and despite the progress, the pressure was mounting. He had secured a few important partnerships and was in the final stages of drafting a new business plan. But everything still felt fragile, like a house of cards that could collapse with the slightest misstep. Maria sat across from him, watching him closely. She had seen the highs and lows, the moments of excitement and the bouts of doubt. She knew, better than anyone, how much effort Tom had put into this project, and despite his occasional outbursts of frustration, she also saw the determination in his eyes. He was no longer the broken man she had met months ago. In many ways, he had transformed, but the weight of his past still hung over him, and he had yet to fully shake off the fear of failure. "You've come so far, Tom," Maria said gently, breaking the silence that had settled over the room. "Look at everything you've accomplished. You're on the verge of something big." Tom shook his head, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I appreciate that, Maria, but it doesn't feel like enough. Every time I think I've got it together, something else goes wrong. The business plan's not where it should be. The investors are dragging their feet, and I don't know if I can trust anyone in the industry anymore." Maria leaned forward, her voice calm and steady. "You're still here, Tom. You're still fighting. That's what matters. You've built something from nothing, and that's no small feat. You can't expect it to happen overnight. Trust takes time, but you're getting there." Tom exhaled slowly, his eyes scanning the table as if searching for answers hidden in the familiar surroundings of the apartment. It was a far cry from the luxurious offices he had once owned, the sprawling penthouse he had lived in when everything seemed perfect. He had come a long way, but the question still lingered in his mind. Was it enough? Was he ready to face the world again, to take the risks that came with starting a new business? And more than that, was he ready to trust again? "I know you're right," he said, his voice low, "but it's hard to shake the feeling that everything could collapse at any moment. What if I'm not ready? What if this is just another failure waiting to happen?" Maria studied him, her gaze softening. "You're not going to fail, Tom. You've learned so much from your past mistakes. You've got experience, knowledge, and a passion for what you do. More importantly, you've got people who believe in you, me included." Tom looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and vulnerability. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Maria. You've been here for me through everything. You've supported me when I didn't even know how to support myself. I don't deserve that." Maria smiled, her heart swelling with affection for him. "You don't need to deserve it, Tom. You're a good person, and you're trying to make things right. That's enough." For a moment, there was a silence between them, and Tom's thoughts began to swirl. He had spent so much time alone in his own head, trying to figure out the next step, trying to fix what had been broken. But for the first time in months, he allowed himself to lean on someone, and that feeling of not having to carry everything by himself was a relief. He sighed, pushing his chair back slightly. "I think it's time to take the next step. I've been dragging my feet for too long. I've got a business to build, and I can't keep waiting for everything to fall into place before I take action." Maria nodded. "What's the next step, then?" Tom's eyes were filled with a renewed determination. "I'm going to call in a few favors. I'm going to meet with some of the investors who backed my previous company and see if I can get them on board for this new venture. I know it's risky, but it's the only way forward." Maria raised an eyebrow. "And you're sure they'll be willing to help you, given everything that's happened?" Tom paused for a moment, his jaw tightening. "I don't know, but if I don't try, I'll never know. I've got nothing left to lose, Maria." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had seen Tom go from a broken man to a man with a mission, but now she saw something more in him, a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. "Then go for it, Tom. Don't hold back. You've got this." The call the following day, Tom stood in front of his phone, his hand hovering over the receiver. He had prepared for this moment for weeks. His mind raced as he dialed the number, and the phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Tom," the voice on the other end said, a familiar tone of indifference in his voice. "What's this about?" Tom swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. "It's been a while, Richard," he began, his voice steady but tinged with an edge of uncertainty. "I know things ended badly between us, but I need to talk to you. I'm working on a new project, and I think there's a chance for us to collaborate again." Richard was silent for a moment, and Tom could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. A new project, after everything that happened with Harris Technologies? Richard's voice was skeptical. "I know I've made mistakes," Tom said, his tone firm but genuine. "But this time, I've learned from those mistakes. This isn't about ego or greed. It's about creating something that can make a real difference. And I need investors who believe in what I'm trying to build." Richard's sigh came through the line, loud and clear. "You're asking me to take a risk again after you lost everything. Why should I trust you now?" Tom's heart raced, but he stood tall, his voice resolute. "Because I'm not the same person I was. I've spent the last few months rebuilding my life, and I'm not going to let the mistakes of the past define me. This is my second chance, and I'm not going to waste it." Another silence passed before Richard spoke again, this time with a slight change in his tone. "All right, Tom. I'll give you a chance, but you better have a solid plan, and you better show me something real. I'm not in the business of wasting time." Tom's chest tightened with relief, but he quickly regained his composure. "You'll have all the details. I'll send over the business plan, and we can meet next week to discuss it further." "Fine," Richard replied, "but don't make me regret this." Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he hung up the phone. He had done it. He had taken the first step toward rebuilding his empire. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, Tom felt a sense of hope. He had a chance to make things right. The next phase over. The next few days, Tom threw himself into his work. He revised the business plan, tweaking every detail, ensuring that it reflected his new vision. He called in favors from old colleagues, set up meetings with potential investors, and made sure that everything was in place for his next big move. Maria watched from the sidelines, offering her support as he worked late into the night. She knew that Tom was on the verge of something big, but she also knew that the pressure was taking its toll. The weight of his past was still with him, and no matter how much he tried to bury it, the fear of failure lingered in his mind. But she could see the fire in his eyes. He wasn't just rebuilding a business, he was rebuilding himself. And that, more than anything, was what kept him going. The meeting, finally. The day arrived for Tom's meeting with Richard. He was nervous, his palms clammy as he walked into the conference room. The table was set, the chairs empty except for one, Richard's. Tom sat down, facing his former business partner, his heart racing. "Thank you for meeting with me," Tom said, trying to keep his voice steady. Richard didn't respond right away. He just stared at Tom, his eyes cold and calculating. "I'll be honest with you, Tom," Richard began, leaning forward slightly. "I don't expect much, but if you can convince me that you've learned from your mistakes, I might consider getting involved." Tom nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I've learned more than I ever could have imagined. This project is about more than just business. It's about making a difference. I have a vision for something that will change the world, and I need people who are willing to take that risk with me." As Tom spoke, he saw a flicker of interest in Richard's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him hope. He had come this far, and now he just needed to prove that he was capable of seeing it through. The meeting lasted for hours. Tom presented his plan, answered questions, and pushed through the tough moments of doubt and skepticism. But when it was all said and done, Richard stood up and extended his hand. "You've got my attention, Tom," Richard said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Let's see what you can do." The weeks that followed Tom's pivotal meeting with Richard were nothing short of a whirlwind. Tom had officially secured the backing of his former business partner, and with that validation came a renewed sense of purpose. The project, which had once seemed like a distant dream, was now taking shape with surprising speed. Tom was no longer just a man trying to piece his life back together. He was the head of a new, growing venture, a venture with the potential to change everything. Maria watched as Tom transformed before her eyes. The man who had once been lost and unsure of himself was now energized, filled with a newfound confidence. He worked tirelessly, meeting with potential investors, finalizing contracts, and navigating the complexities of building a business from the ground up. His vision was taking form, and with each passing day, the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fall into place. But the journey was far from easy. For every victory, there was a setback. For every moment of triumph, there was a challenge waiting just around the corner. The pressures of running a startup were beginning to weigh heavily on Tom. Late nights, endless meetings, and constant problem-solving were starting to take their toll. And though Maria could see his determination, she could also see the exhaustion creeping in. One night, after a particularly grueling day, Tom came home, his shoulders slumped with fatigue. He walked straight into the kitchen, his movements slow and deliberate, as if the weight of the world was resting on him. Maria had been preparing dinner, but as soon as she saw him, she knew something was off. "Long day?" she asked, her voice laced with concern as she set the spoon down. Tom let out a deep sigh, leaning against the counter. "Yeah," he replied, rubbing his temples. "I don't know if I can keep up with this much longer, Maria. I've never been more overwhelmed in my life." Maria walked over to him, her hands gently resting on his shoulders. "You're doing great, Tom. You've come so far already." Tom shook his head, a hint of frustration in his voice. "It's not enough. I'm not sure I'm ready for this. There's so much riding on this. If I fail again, I don't know what I'll do. I can't go through that again." Maria stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. "You're not going to fail. You've learned so much, and you've built this from the ground up. You have the skills, the passion, and the heart to make it work. It's okay to feel overwhelmed, but you're not alone. I'm here." Tom looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and weariness. "I don't deserve you, Maria. You've been here for me through everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." Maria smiled, her heart swelling with affection for him. "You don't need to deserve me, Tom. I'm here because I believe in you. You've come this far, and you're stronger than you realize." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of the past few months settling between them. Tom had come a long way since that first night on her couch, but the road ahead was still long and uncertain. He had made progress, but the fear of failure still lingered, lurking in the back of his mind. "I just need to take a step back," Tom muttered, breaking the silence. "Maybe I'm trying too hard to do everything on my own. Maybe I need to let go of some of the control and trust others to help me." Maria nodded. "That's a good idea. You can't carry it all by yourself. You've already proven that you can do this. You just need to lean on others when you need. 2. Tom sighed, glancing at her with a tired smile. Yeah, I guess you're right. The moment of doubt. The next few days were filled with small victories. Tom had successfully secured several key partnerships, and the momentum was building. But despite the progress, a nagging doubt still lingered in the back of his mind. As he sat at his desk reviewing emails and going over business plans, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had worked so hard to get to this point, but what if it wasn't enough? What if the whole thing came crashing down around him? One afternoon, as Tom was lost in thought, the door to the office opened and Maria stepped inside. She had been busy with her own work, but she had noticed the tension in Tom's posture and the way his eyes had become distant. "Hey," she said softly, walking over to his desk. "You all right?" Tom didn't look up at first, but after a moment he met her gaze. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice didn't carry the usual confidence. "Just a lot on my mind." Maria pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "I can tell. You've been pushing yourself really hard lately. Maybe it's time to take a break to recharge." Tom shook his head. "I can't afford to take a break, Maria. I've come too far to stop now. If I take my foot off the gas, I'll lose everything." Maria reached out, gently touching his arm. "You don't have to keep going like this, Tom. You've already built something incredible. It's okay to step back for a moment, to breathe. I'm here to help, and you don't have to do everything by yourself." For a long moment, Tom just sat there staring at the screen in front of him. The weight of his responsibilities pressed down on him, and the fear of failure gripped him tightly. He had come so far, but the thought of losing it all again was unbearable. "I don't know how to stop," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to let go." Maria smiled softly, her hand resting on his. "You don't have to stop, Tom. You just need to let others in. You've already proven you're capable. You just have to trust that you don't have to do everything alone." Tom's chest tightened, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the flood of emotions he had been holding back. He wanted to succeed more than anything, but the fear of failure was overwhelming. He had lost everything once, and the idea of losing it all again was too much to bear. "I'm scared," he confessed, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm scared of what happens if I fail again." Maria's eyes softened and she leaned forward, her voice filled with understanding. "I know you're scared, but you're not alone in this. You don't have to face it all by yourself. We'll face it together." Tom swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. She was right. He didn't have to do this alone. But the idea of trusting others, of letting go of the control he had once fought so hard to maintain, was terrifying. Yet deep down, he knew it was the only way forward. The breakthrough came a week later when Tom received an unexpected call from a former colleague. It was Adam, one of the engineers who had worked with him at Harris Technologies. Adam had been one of the few who had stuck by Tom during the roughest parts of his downfall, and now he was calling to check in. "Tom, I've been following your progress," Adam said, his voice warm and sincere. "I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. I know how hard this has been, and I think you're on the right path." Tom's heart swelled with gratitude. "Thanks, Adam. That means a lot to me. I know things haven't been easy," Adam continued, "but I think I can help you. I've got a team of engineers who are looking for a new project. If you're still serious about your venture, I'd like to offer you our support. We can help you get this off the ground." Tom's mind raced. He had been so focused on the business side of things that he hadn't considered reaching out to the technical team he had once worked with. But now, the pieces were falling into place. With Adam's team on board, Tom's vision could become a reality. "This is it," Tom whispered to himself as the weight of Adam's words sank in. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. He wasn't alone anymore. He had the support he needed to move forward. The final push in the weeks that followed, Tom and Adam worked tirelessly to integrate the technical team into the project. With their help, the business started to take shape more quickly than Tom had imagined. It wasn't easy, but with each passing day, Tom felt more and more confident in his ability to succeed. The fear of failure didn't disappear entirely, but it began to lose its grip on him. He had learned to trust the process, and more importantly, to trust the people around him. The pieces of his past, the lessons learned from the mistakes he had made, were finally coming together in a way that felt right. As the project neared completion, Tom sat down with Maria one evening, feeling a sense of accomplishment that he hadn't felt in years. "We did it," he said, his voice full of pride. Maria smiled, her eyes shining. "You did it, Tom. I'm so proud of you." Tom looked at her, his heart full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Maria. You've been my rock through all of this." And in that moment, Tom knew that the journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. But now he was ready for whatever came next. The months that followed Tom's breakthrough were a blur of activity, excitement, and relentless work. The company, which had once existed only as a vague idea in Tom's mind, was now a reality. He had secured the necessary investments, assembled a strong team, and began building the business that would not only define his second chance, but would also allow him to prove to himself and the world that he wasn't a failure. Maria watched the transformation with awe. She had been there for every step of the journey, offering support and encouragement when Tom had needed it most. And though she had always believed in him, there was a part of her that still couldn't quite believe how far he had come. The man who had once walked into her life as a homeless, broken soul was now leading a thriving startup, a company on the verge of something extraordinary. But despite the outward signs of success, Tom couldn't shake the weight of his past. The memory of the betrayal, the sense of losing everything, still lingered in his mind. Every decision he made, every move he took, was colored by the fear that he might lose it all again. One evening, as Tom sat in his office going over financial reports and business strategies, his phone buzzed. It was Maria, and he smiled as he saw her name on the screen. She had become more than just a source of support. She had become a part of his life, someone he could rely on not only as a friend, but as a partner. "Hey," he answered, his voice tired but warm. "Hey, how's it going?" Maria's voice was light, but there was a hint of concern in her tone. Tom rubbed his forehead, feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion settle in. "It's going, but there's so much to do. Every time I think I've got a handle on things, something else comes up. The investors want updates, the team needs direction, and I don't know, Maria. I feel like I'm constantly spinning my wheels." Maria was quiet for a moment, as though considering her words carefully. "Tom, I know it's been hard, but you're doing amazing. You've built this company from nothing. You've fought through your darkest moments, and you're still standing. That's more than most people ever achieve." Tom took a deep breath, leaning back in his chair. "I know you're right, but there's this voice in my head that won't stop. The one that tells me I'm not good enough, that I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like every success is followed by a feeling that it's all too fragile, too temporary. What if it all falls apart again?" Maria's voice softened. "Tom, you've already come so far. You've proved that you're capable of more than you ever imagined. It's okay to feel scared, but you can't let that fear hold you back. You've got people who believe in you. I believe in you." Tom closed his eyes, feeling a rush of emotion he had tried so hard to keep buried. "I'm scared, Maria. Scared of failing, scared of trusting people, scared that it will all collapse again. I don't know if I can do it." "Tom, you've already done it. You've built something real. And no matter what happens next, you've shown that you're stronger than you ever thought possible. You've survived, and that's not something you can lose. The words hit him like a wave, and for the first time in months, Tom allowed himself to truly feel the weight of his journey. It had been long, and at times it had felt impossible. But here he was, standing on the edge of something that could change his life forever. He was scared, yes, but he was also ready to step into the future, whatever it held. A new beginning in the weeks that followed, Tom focused on pushing forward. He called meetings with potential clients, met with his team to brainstorm ideas, and kept working on refining the business plan that had been the foundation of his vision. The company was growing, and with each day, Tom felt more confident in the direction it was taking, but the fear still lingered in the back of his mind. He had never fully let go of the fear of failure. Every decision he made seemed like a balancing act between ambition and doubt. But with Maria by his side, he felt like he was finally starting to believe that this could be the real thing. This wasn't just a temporary success. This was a second chance, and he wasn't going to squander it. One day, as he was preparing for an important investor meeting, Tom sat down with Maria to go over the final details. She had been a constant support throughout the entire process, offering her thoughts, helping with ideas, and reminding him of how far he had come. "I'm nervous about this meeting," Tom admitted, pacing back and forth in the small apartment. "This could be the turning point. If they say yes, we'll have everything we need to take this company to the next level. But if they say no, I don't know what I'll do." Maria looked up from the laptop she was working on, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Tom, you've already proved that you're capable of anything. These investors, they're not just investing in a business, they're investing in you. And they're going to see how much you believe in this, in your vision. You've got this." Tom stopped pacing and looked at her. "You always know what to say, don't you?" Maria smiled softly, standing up and walking over to him. "I just believe in you, Tom. You've come so far. You've built something incredible, and you're not going to let anything stop you." He smiled back, the weight of his doubts lifting just a little. "I think you're right. I've fought too hard to give up now." The meeting with the investors came and went, and to Tom's relief, they were impressed with what he had built. They were excited about the future and agreed to back the company. The feeling of validation, of finally proving himself, washed over him in a way that he couldn't fully describe. It wasn't just the money or the investors' support. It was the confirmation that he had done it. He had rebuilt his life step by step, and now he was on the verge of something greater than he had ever dreamed possible. Trusting again. As the company continued to grow, Tom's relationship with Maria also deepened. What had started as a simple act of kindness had evolved into something far more profound. They spent their days working side by side, supporting one another and sharing their hopes and dreams. Tom had never imagined that he would find someone like Maria, someone who believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself, someone who saw his potential even when he couldn't. One evening, as they were sitting on the couch working on some final details for the business, Tom turned to Maria with a question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Maria, what do you see in all of this? In me, in this company, in what we're building?" His voice was quiet, almost uncertain, as if he was afraid of the answer. Maria looked at him, her eyes filled with affection and something deeper, something that went beyond friendship. "I see a man who's been through so much and still keeps fighting. I see someone who refuses to give up, no matter how many times life knocks him down. And I see someone who deserves all the success he's worked for. I see you, Tom, and I believe in you." Tom felt a lump in his throat, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel everything he had been holding back. Maria had been there for him in ways no one else had. She had seen him at his lowest, and she had been the one constant in his life when everything else had felt uncertain. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Maria," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've been my rock. You've shown me what it means to trust again, to believe in myself. I never thought I'd find someone like you." Maria smiled, her eyes softening. "You're not alone anymore, Tom. You've got me and you've got this company. You've got everything you need to succeed. I'm proud of you." Tom reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm proud of us." Maria's smile widened, and in that moment Tom realized something. He wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't afraid of failing, of losing everything. Because no matter what happened, he had already succeeded. He had rebuilt his life from nothing, and he had done it with the help of the people who believed in him. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Tom was ready to face it. With Maria by his side and the strength he had found within himself, he knew that no matter what came next, he would be able to handle it. He had found his second chance. The lesson learned as the months passed, Tom's company continued to thrive. He had built something real, something that wasn't just about business, but about giving people a chance to rebuild, to start fresh, just like he had. The fear of failure still lingered at times, but Tom had learned to face it head-on, to trust in himself and in the people around him. He had learned that success wasn't just about money or power. It was about resilience, about never giving up, about finding the strength to rise again, no matter how many times life knocked you down. And most importantly, Tom had learned that no matter how hard the journey was, he didn't have to face it alone. The end.